So this is what you've been hiding while I was at work.
Hayden, it's not what you think.
The notification pinged at 11:47 p.m. while I was hunched over blueprints for the Morrison Hotel renovation, my third cup of coffee growing cold beside my drafting tablet. The message came from an account I didn't recognize. A truth teller 2024. She's laughing about you at the Starlight Rooftop. Check her story. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My gut twisted like a wrench turning the wrong way. Jocelyn was supposed to be at her book club tonight, some pretentious gathering where suburban housewives discuss novels they'd probably never finished. But the Starlight Rooftop? That was downtown, expensive, the kind of place where influencers and tech bros went to see and be seen. I grabbed my phone with hands that felt disconnected from my body. Jocelyn's Instagram story loaded slowly, each second stretching like taffy. Then there she was, my wife of 18 years, wine glass raised high, her perfectly highlighted blonde hair catching the city lights. "To being free of extra weight," she announced to a crowd of laughing faces. The camera panned to show Preston Vale, that tech investor prick who'd been circling our social circle like a shark for months. His arm was around her waist, proprietary and confident. "Some women get stuck with architects," Jocelyn continued, her voice slightly slurred but her cruelty crystal clear. "They build walls instead of bridges, if you know what I mean." More laughter. Preston squeezed her closer. I set the phone down carefully, like it might explode. My hands were shaking, not with sadness, but with something colder. Rage, maybe, or the kind of clarity that comes when everything you thought you knew gets demolished in 30 seconds of video. The coffee tasted like ash when I tried to drink it. I'd been married to this woman since I was 23, back when I was just another kid from the wrong side of town, with big dreams and calloused hands. I'd built my architectural firm from nothing, worked 18-hour days, missed family dinners and school plays, all so she could live the lifestyle she craved. And this was how she repaid me. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Troy Barrett, T-Bone to everyone who knew him from his boxing days. The text was short. "Dude, you need to see this." Attached was a video file. I almost didn't open it. Some part of me, the part that still believed in fairy tales and happy endings, wanted to pretend that Instagram story was just Jocelyn being dramatic after too much wine. But I'd learned long ago that ignoring problems doesn't make them disappear. It just makes them bigger. The video was grainy, shot from across a crowded club, but the audio was clear enough. Jocelyn's voice, unmistakable even over the pounding music. Hayden thinks he's so smart with his blueprints and his measurements. But he never measured what really mattered. How bored I was. Preston gets it. He knows how to treat a woman like she deserves. Someone off camera asked about our son Eli, away at college. Jocelyn's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Eli will understand. He's young, but he's not blind. He sees how his father just settles for mediocre. Preston and I, we're building something bigger." The video ended. I sat in my office, surrounded by the architectural drawings that had consumed my life, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. It was like watching a building's foundation crack. Once it starts, the whole structure is doomed. I opened my laptop and started digging. Bank statements, credit card bills, phone records, all the digital breadcrumbs of a marriage I'd apparently been sleepwalking through. What I found made my stomach clench. Hotel charges at the Meridian downtown, expensive dinners for two at restaurants I'd never been to, gift purchases from jewelry stores that had never seen my credit card, all of it charged to our joint account, all of it happening while I was working late, trying to keep our life afloat. The most recent charge was from 3 hours ago. Bottle service at the Starlight Rooftop. $467. She'd used our money to fund the party where she publicly humiliated me. I laughed, but there was no humor in it, just the bitter recognition of how thoroughly I'd been played. Jocelyn had always been good at managing her image, crafting the perfect social media presence, making everything look effortless and enviable. I just never realized I was part of the performance, the stable, boring husband who provided the foundation for her more exciting adventures. My phone rang. Jocelyn's name flashed on the screen, along with that photo I'd taken of her last Christmas, smiling in front of our tree. She looked so happy in that picture. I wondered if she'd already been planning this betrayal then. I let it go to voicemail. Then I opened my drafting software and started working on something new. Not a building this time, but a plan. Because if there's one thing architects understand, it's that before you can build something better, you have to tear down what's broken. And my marriage was definitely broken. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I crashed on the couch in my office, using my jacket as a blanket and a stack of project proposals as a pillow. When I woke up at dawn with a crick in my neck and the taste of stale coffee in my mouth, I had 17 missed calls from Jocelyn and a text message that made my pressure spike. "Where are you? We need to talk. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Don't make this harder? I stared at the message until the words blurred. She was the one who'd been living a double life, spending our money on her affair, humiliating me in public, and somehow I was the one making things difficult. I showered in the executive bathroom, one of the perks of being a partner in McClure & Associates architecture, and put on the spare clothes I kept in my office closet. In the mirror, I looked older than my 41 years, with lines around my eyes that hadn't been there last month and gray creeping into my dark hair. When had that happened? When had I stopped paying attention to my own life? My assistant Rebecca arrived at 8:30 with coffee and a concerned expression. "You look like hell, Hayden. Everything okay?" "Just working late on the Morrison project," I lied smoothly. Rebecca had been with the firm for 6 years, and she'd seen me through plenty of all-nighters. But she also followed Jocelyn on social media, and I could see the questions in her eyes. "Your wife called the office looking for you," she said carefully. "I told her you were in meetings all morning." "Thanks. Hold my calls for a while, would you?" I spent the morning researching divorce lawyers, using my office computer's private browsing mode like I was planning a heist. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was hiding in my own business, researching how to legally separate from the woman I'd built my life around. At noon, T-Bone showed up unannounced, filling my office doorway like a mountain of muscle and concern. Even in his 50s, Troy Barrett looked like he could still go 12 rounds with men half his age. These days, he owned a bar called the Corner Pocket instead of throwing punches for money, but he carried himself with the same quiet confidence that had made him a local boxing legend. "You look like shit," he said, settling his bulk into one of my client chairs. "So I've been told." Jocelyn's been calling around, asking if anyone's seen you, playing the worried wife angle. His expression was carefully neutral, but I could read the subtext. T-Bone had never liked my wife, though he'd been too loyal to say so directly. "Did you see the rest of it? From last night?" He nodded grimly. "Posted it to her story around 2 a.m. Real classy stuff. Preston's all over her like a rash, and she's eating up the attention." I pulled up Jocelyn's Instagram on my phone. The story from last night was gone. She'd probably deleted it once she sobered up and realized how bad it looked. But there were new posts from this morning. Carefully curated shots of her morning routine, her yoga mat, her green smoothie, the perfect influencer lifestyle. No hint of the chaos she'd created. "She's got 43,000 followers now," I said, scrolling through the comments. "Up from 38 last month." "Drama cells," T-Bone said. "Question is, what are you going to do about it?" Before I could answer, my office door burst open. Jocelyn stood there in a flowing sundress and designer sunglasses, looking like she'd stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. Behind her, Rebecca was making apologetic gestures and mouthing, "I'm sorry." "There you are," Jocelyn said, her voice pitched for maximum dramatic effect. "I've been worried sick." T-Bone stood up slowly, all 6'4" of him unfolding like a threat. "I'll let you two talk," he said, but his tone suggested he'd rather stay and referee. "Actually," I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded, "T-Bone can stay. This affects him too, since you've been talking about our private life to anyone who'll listen." Jocelyn's perfectly contoured face flushed slightly. "That was just people were asking questions about us, about why you've been so distant lately." "Distant?" I laughed, and this time there was genuine humor in it, the kind you get when someone says something so absurd it breaks your brain. "I've been working 16-hour days trying to keep this firm profitable so you can maintain your lifestyle. When exactly was I supposed to be less distant?" "See? This is what I'm talking about," she said, turning to play to an imaginary audience. "Even in private," Jocelyn performed. "Everything is about work with you. About money and success and building the next big project. When was the last time we actually talked? Really talked? When was the last time you weren't live streaming our conversations to your followers?" T-Bone coughed, a sound that might have been covering a laugh. Jocelyn shot him a venomous look. "I think your friend should leave," she said. "This is between us." "No," I said firmly. "T-Bone stays. He's been more honest with me in the past 24 hours than you have in the past 24 months. The mask slipped then, just for a second. I saw the real Jocelyn underneath the carefully constructed persona, calculating, cold, annoyed that her script wasn't being followed. "Fine," she said, settling into the other client chair like she was granting us an audience. "Let's talk. I assume you saw the post from last night?" You mean the ones where you publicly humiliated your husband and announced your affair to the internet? Yeah, I saw those. It's not an affair, she said, and had the audacity to sound offended. Preston and I are friends, good friends, the kind of friends who actually support each other's dreams instead of just existing in parallel. Friends don't usually spend $467 on bottle service together, at least not with their friend's husband's money. Her composure cracked a little more. You've been checking the accounts? It's my money too, Jocelyn. Or did you forget that part when you were building your new life? T-Bone was watching this exchange like a tennis match, his dark eyes moving between us. I could practically see him taking notes for the inevitable post-mortem conversation we'd have later. Look, Jocelyn said, switching tactics and going for wounded vulnerability. I know this looks bad, but Preston understands me in ways that you don't anymore. He sees my potential. He believes in what I'm building with my platform. What you're building, I repeated, with the money I earn, in the house I bought, using the stability I provide. I contribute too. The vulnerability act cracked completely. Do you have any idea how much work it takes to maintain a social media presence? The content creation, the brand partnerships, the networking? I'm building something here, Hayden. Something bigger than just this. She gestured around my office dismissively. This? T-Bone spoke for the first time since she'd arrived. You mean the business he built from nothing? The one that pays for your lifestyle? I wasn't talking to you, Jocelyn snapped. But you were talking about him, T-Bone replied evenly. To a room full of strangers. Last night, seemed like you had plenty to say then. The silence stretched between us like a fault line. I could see Jocelyn calculating, trying to figure out how to spin this, how to make herself the victim of circumstances rather than the architect of betrayal. I want a divorce, I said quietly. The words hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Jocelyn's face went through several expressions, surprise, anger, calculation, and finally something that might have been relief. If that's what you want, she said carefully, then we should discuss terms. I think we can be civilized about this, for Eli's sake, if nothing else. Civilized, I repeated. Like last night was civilized? I was hurt, Hayden. I was angry. People say things when they're emotional. And the hotel charges, the dinners, the gifts, were those emotional too? She stood up abruptly, smoothing her dress. I think we should continue this conversation through lawyers. This is getting too heated. Actually, I said, standing up as well, I think we should continue this conversation in public, since you seem to prefer that venue. Her eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? I smiled, and for the first time in months, it felt genuine. It means I'm done being the stable, boring husband in your story. If you want to play this game in public, then we'll play it in public, but you might not like the rules. She left without another word, her heels clicking angrily on the polished concrete floor. Through my office window, I watched her get into her car, a BMW X5 that I'd bought her for her birthday last year. She sat there for a moment, probably composing her next social media post, crafting the narrative of her victimization. You sure about this? T-Bone asked after she was gone. I thought about it for a moment, watching Jocelyn drive away toward whatever life she was building without me. Yeah, I said finally. I'm sure. She wants to play architect with our lives? Fine, but I'm better at blueprints than she is. T-Bone grinned, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. This should be interesting. The war began at Eli's college orientation weekend. I hadn't planned it that way. If anything, I'd hoped to keep our family drama away from our son. But Jocelyn had other ideas. I arrived at State University on Saturday morning, having driven the 3 hours from the city in my pickup truck with a cooler full of Eli's favorite snacks and a heart full of dread. The campus was beautiful in that manufactured way of modern universities. Red brick buildings connected by perfectly manicured walkways. Everything designed to look prestigious and worth the crushing debt. Eli met me in the parking lot, and for a moment, seeing his face light up, I forgot about everything else. He looked like me at 19, tall and lanky, with dark hair that never stayed where he combed it and intelligent eyes that took in everything. But he had his mother's smile, the one that could convince you to believe in impossible things. Dad, you made it! He wrapped me in a hug that smelled like cheap cologne and optimism. I wasn't sure you'd be able to get away from work. Wouldn't miss it, I said, meaning it. How's the dorm situation? My roommate's cool. He's from Oregon, wants to study environmental science. We stayed up until like 3 a.m. talking about sustainable building design. I told him my dad could probably get him an internship. The pride in his voice hit me like a physical blow. Here was my son, bragging about me to his new friend, still believing in the man I'd tried to be. And meanwhile, his mother was busy tearing down everything I'd built. "We'll see what we can do," I said, ruffling his hair. "So what's the plan for today?" "There's a welcome barbecue at noon, then some activities for families. Mom said she might make it, but she wasn't sure." He paused, studying my face. "Everything okay with you guys? She's been posting some weird stuff lately." Before I could answer, I heard a familiar laugh from across the parking lot. Jocelyn's voice, bright and performative, carried on the morning air like the sound of breaking glass. I turned to see her approaching with Preston in tow, both of them dressed like they were attending a country club event rather than a college barbecue. "Eli!" Jocelyn called out, her arms spread wide for maximum visual impact. "My baby!" She was recording, of course. Her phone was in Preston's hands, capturing every moment of her maternal performance. Eli looked confused, but went in for the hug anyway, because he was a good kid who loved his mother despite everything. "Mom, you made it," he said, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "And Preston?" "Preston wanted to meet you," Jocelyn said brightly, still playing to the camera. "He's heard so much about you." Preston stepped forward with his hand extended, all practiced charm and expensive dental work. "Great to finally meet you, Eli. Your mom talks about you constantly." I watched my son shake hands with the man who was sleeping with his mother, and something cold and sharp settled in my chest. This wasn't just about my marriage anymore. This was about my kid, my relationship with him, the family we'd built together over 19 years. "Dad's here too," Eli said, gesturing toward me with obvious relief. Preston's smile flickered for just a moment when he saw me. "Hayden, didn't expect to see you here." "Funny," I said, not moving to shake his hand. "I was thinking the same thing about you." Jocelyn stepped between us, her influencer smile cranked to maximum wattage. "Let's not make this awkward, okay? This is about Eli." "You're absolutely right," I said. "This is about Eli. So maybe you could explain why you brought your boyfriend to his college orientation." "Preston is my friend," she said, but her voice had that edge it got when she was losing control of the narrative. "He's been incredibly supportive during this difficult time." "What difficult time?" Eli asked. He was looking between us like he was trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Jocelyn and I stared at each other. This was the moment. Tell our son that his parents were getting divorced, that his mother had been having an affair, that everything he thought he knew about his family was built on lies. Or keep pretending for a few more hours. Give him this one day of normalcy before his world changed forever. "Your parents are having some problems," Preston said into the silence, his voice oozing false sympathy. "But they're handling it very maturely." I wanted to hit him, not just for the condescension, but for inserting himself into the most important conversation of my son's life, for taking away my choice about how and when to tell Eli the truth. "Problems?" Eli looked at me, then at his mother. "What kind of problems?" "The kind that happen when people grow apart," Jocelyn said carefully, "when they want different things from life." "Are you getting divorced?" The word hung in the air like a smoke alarm. Eli's face had gone pale, and I could see him trying to process this information, trying to figure out how he'd missed the signs. "We're discussing our options," I said, which was the truth without being cruel. "But whatever happens between your mother and me, it doesn't change how we feel about you." "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Eli said, his voice cracking slightly. "I leave for college, and everything falls apart." "Nothing's falling apart," Jocelyn said quickly. "We're just restructuring, like a business merger, but in reverse." I stared at her. She'd just compared our marriage to a business deal in front of our son, while her boyfriend filmed it for social media. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. "Actually," I said, surprised by how calm I sounded, "it's more like discovering that your business partner has been embezzling from the company account to fund their startup with a competitor." Preston lowered the phone. Jocelyn's face flushed red. "Hayden, don't." "Don't what? Tell the truth? Use actual facts instead of social media spin?" "What's he talking about?" Eli asked, looking at his mother. "Your father is being dramatic," Jocelyn said, but her voice was shaking now. "He's hurt, and he's lashing out." "I'm hurt?" I laughed, and it sounded harsh even to my own ears. "I'm not the one who spent the last 6 months lying to my family. I'm not the one who used our joint account to fund dates with another man. I'm not the one who publicly humiliated my spouse for internet points." "Stop it," Eli said, his voice stronger now. "Just stop, both of you." We all turned to look at him, my son, my kid who'd always been the peacemaker, the one who smoothed over family arguments and found compromise solutions to every problem. He looked older suddenly, like he'd aged years in the past 5 minutes. I don't want to hear about accounts or social media or who did what to whom, he said. I want to know if you two can be in the same space without making everything about your drama. Because if you can't, then maybe you should figure out a custody schedule for family events, because I'm not choosing sides. The word custody hit like a slap. Eli was already thinking in those terms, already planning for the logistics of a broken family. I'd failed him, failed to protect him from this mess, failed to keep his world stable. Of course we can be civil, Jocelyn said, but she was looking at Preston, not at me or Eli. Can we? I asked. Because 5 minutes ago you were recording our conversation for your followers. That doesn't feel very civil to me. Preston held up the phone. I stopped recording when things got personal. When did they get personal? I stepped closer to him, close enough to see the fear in his eyes. When I mentioned the money? When I mentioned the lies? Or when I mentioned that you're sleeping with my wife? Dad. Eli's voice was quiet but firm. Please don't do this here. I looked around and realized we'd attracted an audience. Other families were staring, some openly, others pretending to be interested in their campus maps while they listened to our domestic drama unfold. This was exactly what Jocelyn wanted, a public scene that would cast her as the victim and me as the unstable ex-husband. You're right, I said to Eli. This isn't the place. But as I turned to walk away, Preston made his mistake. Maybe you should think about anger management, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. For Eli's sake. I stopped walking, turned around slowly. What did you say? I just think. You think? I stepped closer, and Preston stepped back. You think you have the right to give me parenting advice? You think you know what's best for my son? Hayden, please, Jocelyn said, but she was recording again. I could see her phone's camera pointed at us, capturing every moment of my breakdown for posterity. You want to see anger? I asked Preston, my voice quiet. Keep talking about my kid. Keep inserting yourself into my family. See what happens. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Security arrived then. 2 campus police officers who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. The crowd of families parted to let them through, everyone staring at the spectacle we'd created. Everything okay here? The older officer asked. Just a family disagreement, Jocelyn said smoothly, switching instantly to her public persona. My ex-husband is having trouble adjusting to our separation. Ex-husband. She'd promoted herself from wife to victim in one sentence, rewriting our entire history for an audience of strangers. Sir? The officer looked at me. Do we have a problem? I looked at Eli, who was staring at the ground like he wanted to disappear. At Jocelyn, who was still recording, still performing, still turning our family's destruction into content. At Preston, who was trying to look sympathetic while hiding behind campus security. No problem, I said finally. I was just leaving. I hugged Eli goodbye, whispering, I love you, in his ear and promising to call him later. Then I walked back to my truck, feeling the weight of dozens of stares, hearing the whispered conversations that would follow me off campus. As I drove away, I could see Jocelyn in my rearview mirror, surrounded by concerned parents and campus officials playing the role of the brave single mother dealing with her unstable ex. She'd won this round, turned my anger into her advantage, made me look like exactly the kind of man who needed anger management, but she'd also made a crucial mistake. She'd brought Preston into Eli's life, forced our son to choose sides, and recorded the whole thing for her social media empire. And now I knew exactly how to hit back. The video went viral within 6 hours. Not the version Jocelyn posted to her Instagram, that carefully edited highlight reel that showed me threatening Preston while she played the terrified victim. No, the video that broke the internet was the one filmed by another parent, capturing the full context of our confrontation, including Preston's smug advice about anger management and Jocelyn's casual reference to our business merger in reverse. T-Bone called me at 10 p.m., laughing so hard he could barely speak. Dude, have you seen Twitter? Shocked, business merger in reverse is trending. Someone made a meme out of your wife's face when you mentioned the embezzling. I was sitting in my office again, having spent the afternoon driving aimlessly around the city, trying to process what had happened at Eli's school. The shame was still there. I'd lost control, made a scene, probably embarrassed my son. But underneath it was something else, a cold satisfaction that Jocelyn's performance had backfired. How bad is it? I asked. For her? Pretty bad. The comments on her posts are brutal. People are calling her out for bringing the boyfriend to a family event, for recording private conversations, for that whole business merger thing. Her follower count is actually dropping. I opened my laptop and searched for the hashtag. T-Bone was right. The internet had latched onto Jocelyn's corporate speak like piranhas on fresh meat. The memes were savage. Her face photoshopped onto stock photos of failed business presentations, fake LinkedIn posts about restructuring your marriage for optimal ROI, mock advertisements for Preston Vale, home wrecker, and life coach. But it was the comments on the original video that really got to me. Hundreds of people sharing their own stories of cheating spouses, of public humiliation, of having their pain turned into someone else's content. For the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. My phone buzzed with a text from Eli. "Dad, are you okay? This is getting crazy online." I called him immediately. "Hey kiddo, how are you holding up?" "I'm processing." His voice sounded tired. "My roommate showed me some of the videos. I had no idea things were this bad between you and Mom. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I wanted to tell you myself when we could sit down and talk properly." "Is it true about the money and the other stuff?" I closed my eyes. "Yeah, it's true. Your mother and I have been having problems for a while. I probably should have said something sooner. And Preston? Are they really?" "Yeah." Silence on the other end. I could hear music playing in the background, the distant sound of college life continuing despite our family drama. "I feel like an idiot," Eli said finally. "All those times she posted about you being at work, about being a single parent when you were traveling for projects, I thought she was just being dramatic. But she was actually building a case against you, wasn't she?" The insight surprised me. Eli was smarter than I'd given him credit for, more aware of his mother's manipulations than either of us had realized. "I think she was building a narrative," I said carefully. "People see what they want to see on social media." "Well, they're seeing something different now. Some of the comments are pretty harsh." "Are you okay with that? I know she's your mother." Another pause. "I love Mom, but what she did today, bringing Preston, recording everything, making it about her brand instead of about our family, that wasn't okay. You lost your temper, but she lost something bigger." I felt a surge of pride in my son, mixed with sadness that he'd had to grow up so fast. "What happens now?" he asked. "I don't know yet. But whatever happens, it won't change how I feel about you. You're the best thing your mother and I ever did together." After we hung up, I spent another hour reading comments and watching the various videos that had emerged from the campus incident. Someone had even done a slow-motion analysis of Preston's facial expressions, set to dramatic music. The internet was having a field day with my family's destruction. But buried in all the mockery and memes, I found something useful. Several people had posted screenshots of Jocelyn's recent social media activity, analyzing the timeline of her posts and comparing them to her public statements about our marriage. The internet detectives had been busy, and they'd uncovered a pattern of deception that went back months. Posts about girls' nights that coincided with Preston's business trips, photos of expensive gifts she'd claimed were treating myself purchases, check-ins at restaurants and events that didn't match her stated whereabouts. The crowdsourced investigation was more thorough than anything I could have done alone. My phone rang. Jocelyn's name flashed on the screen, but when I answered, Preston's voice came through instead. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "Do we? Because I thought you'd said everything you needed to say about anger management." "Look, I know you're angry." "I'm not angry," I interrupted. "I'm done. There's a difference. Jocelyn is getting serious threats. People are posting her address online. This has gone too far." I sat up straighter. "Serious threats?" "Some of the comments, they're pretty violent. She's scared." Despite everything, I felt a flicker of concern. Jocelyn had made her choices, but she didn't deserve to be terrorized by internet strangers. "What do you want me to do about it?" I asked. "Post something. Tell people to back off. You have influence here. They're treating you like the victim." "I am the victim, Preston. My wife had an affair, spent our money on dates with you, and then publicly humiliated me for social media content. The fact that her plan backfired doesn't make me responsible for the consequences." "She's still Eli's mother." "Then maybe she should have thought about that before she turned our family drama into a reality show." I could hear muffled voices in the background, Jocelyn saying something urgent, Preston covering the phone to respond. "She wants to talk to you," he said finally. "I'll bet she does. But unless she's calling to discuss divorce terms, we don't have anything to talk about." "Hayden, please." Jocelyn's voice now, tearful and desperate. "I know I made mistakes, but this is insane. People are calling me a narcissist, a gold digger, a terrible mother. They're saying I don't deserve custody of Eli. Maybe you should have considered that before you made our private life public. I never wanted it to go this far. I was hurt, I was angry, I made some bad decisions, but I'm still your wife. We took vows. You broke those vows when you started sleeping with Preston. You broke them when you stole money from our accounts. You broke them when you turned our marriage into content for your followers. Don't talk to me about vows." So that's it? 18 years of marriage and you're just going to throw it away? I looked around my office, at the architectural drawings covering every surface, at the photos of buildings I'd designed, at the life I'd built through 18-hour days and endless sacrifice. All of it so she could live comfortably while she planned her exit strategy. "I'm not throwing anything away, Jocelyn. You already did that." I hung up and turned off my phone. Outside my office window, the city sparkled in the darkness. Thousands of lights in thousands of windows, each one representing someone else's life, someone else's dreams and struggles and failures. For the first time in months, I didn't feel trapped by the weight of other people's expectations. I felt free. 3 weeks later, Jocelyn made her biggest mistake yet. She announced her engagement to Preston Vale on Instagram, complete with a professional photo shoot and a ring that probably cost more than most people's cars. The post was a masterpiece of tone-deaf narcissism. Sometimes life takes you in unexpected directions, and you have to be brave enough to follow your heart. Preston and I are so excited to start this new chapter together. The comments section exploded within minutes. The internet had not forgotten or forgiven Jocelyn's behavior, and her attempt to rebrand her affair as a romantic love story went over about as well as a lead balloon. But it wasn't the public backlash that got my attention. It was the location tag on the photos, the penthouse apartment where Jocelyn had been living since our separation. The same apartment she'd claimed to own, the one she'd used as proof of her financial independence and successful brand partnerships. I'd done some digging over the past few weeks, using the research skills I'd developed as an architect and the network of contacts I'd built over 2 decades in business. What I'd found was illuminating. Jocelyn didn't own that penthouse. She was leasing it month to month at an astronomical rate, funded by maxing out credit cards and liquidating investments. The successful brand partnerships she'd been bragging about were mostly small-time sponsorship deals that barely covered her expenses. Her follower count was inflated with purchase bots, and her engagement rates were plummeting as people lost interest in her drama. In short, she was broke. And Preston, despite his tech investor image, wasn't in much better shape. His last startup had failed spectacularly, and he was living off the remnants of a modest inheritance while desperately trying to raise funding for his next venture. They were 2 people pretending to be successful, funding their fake lifestyle with other people's money, including mine. I called my lawyer, a sharp woman named Diana Reeves, who specialized in high-asset divorces and had a reputation for being ruthless when her clients were wronged. "I've been waiting for your call," Diana said when I reached her. "I assume you saw the engagement announcement?" "Hard to miss. Half the internet is talking about it." "Good. That makes our job easier. Nothing like public documentation of adultery to strengthen a divorce case." "What are our options?" "Well, the good news is that your wife has been incredibly stupid. The social media posts, the public statements, the financial records you provided. It's like she's been building our case for us. The bad news is that she's going to fight dirty." "How dirty?" "She's already started. Her lawyer filed a motion claiming you've been financially abusive, that you controlled all the money and kept her in a state of dependence. They're painting you as the controlling husband who drove her into the arms of another man." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "She spent $40,000 of our money on her affair. How is that financial abuse?" Logic isn't always relevant in divorce court, but we have documentation and we have public statements that contradict her narrative. Plus, the internet has been very helpful in preserving evidence she might have tried to delete. "What's the timeline?" 6 months, maybe less if we can reach a settlement. But Hayden, you need to be prepared for this to get ugly. She's going to try to destroy your reputation, your business, your relationship with Eli. Are you ready for that? I thought about it for a moment, looking out at the city I'd helped build, one project at a time. She already tried that. It didn't work. Good, then let's get to work. The divorce proceedings began in earnest 2 weeks later. Jocelyn had hired a lawyer with a reputation for representing wronged wives, a man who specialized in portraying his female clients as victims of patriarchal oppression. It might have worked, if not for the mountain of evidence contradicting that narrative. The financial records alone were damning. Jocelyn had spent over $60,000 in 6 months on restaurants, hotels, gifts, and luxury purchases, all while claiming to be building her business. When pressed to provide documentation of her income from social media partnerships, she could only produce invoices totaling less than $8,000. But the real bombshell came when Diana subpoenaed Preston's financial records as part of the adultery claim. What we found was even worse than I'd suspected. Preston Vale wasn't just broke. He was in debt to some very dangerous people. His last startup hadn't just failed. It had been shut down by federal investigators for securities fraud. He was currently under investigation by the SEC and facing potential criminal charges. Jocelyn had left me for a man who was likely going to prison. The information came out during a deposition that was supposed to be routine. Preston's lawyer tried to object, but once the federal investigation became part of the public record, there was no putting that genie back in the bottle. I watched Jocelyn's face when Diana laid out the evidence. For the first time since this whole mess began, she looked genuinely shocked. Whatever Preston had told her about his financial situation, it wasn't the truth. "Did you know about Mr. Vale's legal troubles?" Diana asked. No. He said he was between projects." "Did you know that he's been using your social media presence to attract potential investors to his fraudulent schemes?" Jocelyn's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. Preston hadn't just been sleeping with my wife, he'd been using her to commit crimes. The engagement lasted another week. Jocelyn announced the mutual decision to postpone their wedding in a carefully worded Instagram post that fooled no one. The comments were merciless. But I wasn't done yet. The final piece of my revenge came together when Diana discovered that Jocelyn had been violating the terms of several sponsorship agreements by not properly disclosing her relationship status. The Federal Trade Commission takes influencer disclosure requirements very seriously, and failing to mention that you're spending your sponsor's money on dates with your boyfriend is a significant violation. Within days, Jocelyn lost her remaining brand partnerships. Her follower count, already declining, went into freefall as people realized her entire lifestyle was built on lies and fraud. The penthouse lease was terminated, the BMW was repossessed. The designer clothes and expensive jewelry went to consignment shops to pay for her legal fees. By the time our divorce was finalized, Jocelyn had lost everything she'd thought she wanted. Her social media empire was in ruins, her boyfriend was facing federal charges, and her reputation was destroyed beyond repair. I got the house, the business, and primary custody of Eli, who had watched his mother's public downfall with a mixture of sadness and disgust. "I feel bad for her," he told me one evening as we sat in our kitchen, eating takeout Chinese food and planning his spring break visit. "But I also feel like she did this to herself, you know?" "People make choices," I said. Sometimes those choices have consequences." "Are you happy?" he asked. "I mean, really happy? Or are you just satisfied that she got what she deserved?" It was a good question, the kind that made me proud of the young man he was becoming. I thought about it for a moment, looking around the house that was finally peaceful again, thinking about the business that was thriving without the constant drama, considering the future that stretched ahead of me like a blank blueprint. "I'm not happy that your mother destroyed her life," I said finally, "but I'm happy that I'm free to build something better." Jocelyn moved back in with her parents in Ohio, her social media accounts dormant, her influencer dreams as over as our marriage. Preston Vale was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison for securities fraud. The penthouse where they'd planned their future together became someone else's home. And I kept building. New projects, new relationships, a new life constructed on a foundation of truth instead of lies. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how things ended, if I wish I'd tried harder to save my marriage. But architects understand something that most people don't. Before you can build something beautiful, you have to clear away what's broken. Some demolitions are messier than others, but they're always necessary.